Well, welcome to My Schools Tucson virtual webinar. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. And we know how important setting our children up for success is to parents, and we want to make sure that we support and empower you so that you can make that happen. So as the presentation's going on, it will be somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, and we'll run through some slides. But if you have any questions, obviously, feel free to plop those in the chat. And we will get those answered either as we're going on, or we'll spend some time at the end answering questions. So appreciate you being here. And before I dive in, we do have a bilingual option if we have any Spanish speakers. So maybe Dzoara, just hop on and say that in Spanish in case we need to move over to Spanish.
Hola, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por reunirse con nosotros el día de hoy. Hoy vamos a estar hablando de evaluar sus opciones escolares de los grados kinder hasta el 12. Si alguien necesita la presentación en español, por favor háganos saber y se la podemos dar en español. Gracias.
Any Spanish takers? We're going to roll in English. Yeah. All right. Okay, so agenda for today. So at some point, all parents get to a point where they begin to make important decisions about their child's education. So my guess is that if you are tuning in today, you're either in the process or you're curious about how to evaluate schools as you start exploring your school options. So today we're going to go over some key concepts that will empower families and help you make informed decisions. We'll make sure that you have access to the My Schools Tucson resources. We'll walk you through some basic first steps to evaluating schools and what to look at, and then present some parent pitfalls to avoid when going down this road. So that's our agenda today. So I am Scott Evans. I'm the Director of Family and School Engagement here at Community Investment Corporation, which is a nonprofit in Tucson. I hold a master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Arizona. And prior to my role here with CIC, I spent over 15 years serving as the Director of Counseling in Tucson's public and private high schools. I've been at CIC since 2021, helping families engage with their schools and ultimately finding schools that fit their child and their family's needs. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Dzoara Ruiz, who you heard speak Spanish earlier. Dzoara?
Hi, I'm Dzoara Ruiz. I am a program manager for My Schools Tucson, and I provide all the services in Spanish.
All right, so who is CIC? Real brief. Community Investment Corporation is a nonprofit, and we're dedicated to financial empowerment of Pima County. Our mission is really access to the economy for all, regardless of background or socioeconomic status. We have 3 different program areas that we work. We have home ownership, entrepreneurship, and education. Those are our 3 pillars. And Dzoara and I live in the education pillar, and we believe that every child deserves this to thrive at school, and every parent deserves the tools to make that happen. So what is My Schools Tucson? So My Schools Tucson is something that we launched a couple of years ago. It is a way to connect, inform, and engage parents in their child's educational journey. And our program really focuses on helping parents navigate the K-12 educational system with confidence, and really starting with the pre-K, preschool families, preparing them for their child's first step into kindergarten. We do have, our emphasis is really pre-K, but all of our content is really across the board K through 12. Like, you can take lots of these concepts and apply it to if you're exploring high schools, middle schools, elementary. So it's not just specifically pre-K to kinder, although that is where we sort of lean in and focus our attention. And so what My Schools Tucson is essentially, it's a school locator, much like Zillow for Pima County schools, where a family can go and see all the school options that are around them in their area. You can filter and really just see what's available and what your options are for your family. We've tried to simplify that, make it a one-stop shop for families to save you a little bit of time. We've also got a website that's packed full of resources to help families engage with their kids' education, with an emphasis on school exploration. And in addition to that, we offer direct one-on-one support for parents or guardians who are wanting to talk to somebody or get questions answered. We can do that via email, phone, or Zoom. So the why behind My Schools Tucson, essentially, where you send your child to school is a really big decision, or at least it feels big, and it feels big for first-time parent. It can feel very weighty. You want nothing more than to do what is right and set your child up for success. And so that can feel like a really big, daunting decision for families going through it for the first time. And so really that is where My Schools Tucson was born, with that in mind. In Arizona, there are lots of options and lots of options for schools, and that can feel intimidating and challenging. So we're here to sort of simplify that process. We surveyed Arizona families and found that many parents and guardians lack the time, resources, and knowledge as to how to navigate the school enrollment process. So we certainly wanted to find a way to make this a little bit easier for families and get them engaged in this process. And so the educational landscape has changed a lot over time. Most of us parents, I have a child who's in first grade and fourth grade. And so if you have kids that are in school, you most likely grew up in a different era under a different system. So the educational landscape looks a lot different today. And so essentially we have parents raising their kids and making decisions about education in a system that they're quite unfamiliar with or don't know a lot about, right? So so it can be a little bit challenging and hard to sort of process all the information that's out there. So just out of curiosity, I'd like to sort of ask, what type of K-12 school did you attend? Did you attend a public district school, a charter school, a private school? Were you homeschooled? My guess is that most of us were public district schools or private school kids, but curious to know where others attended their K-12 education. And maybe it was a mix. So throw that in chat if you don't mind. And gone are the days where families only have one school option. I grew up in a system where it was public district school, or if your family had money, potentially you were considering a private school. And I grew up in a different state. So that was different as well. So me personally, I attended public district school in California, K through 12. And that's really all I knew when I became a parent. And that was my sort of context. About 60% of parents send their children to a different school type than the one that they have attended. So lots and lots of parents are out there making decisions about where to send their kid to school and semi-unfamiliar with what those options really entail. Any chat responses? Do we know where?
Public schools.
Public schools, okay. Anybody attend school outside of the state of Arizona? Or even outside of the country?
I did. I went to private school in Mexico.
Okay. So, I mean, really, we're here to talk about how to evaluate your school options. But before we do that, I think it's important to understand what our options are in Arizona today. And that can be a lot to unpack for a parent who grew up in a different system or a different era or a different time or different state. So public schools, public district schools, at first glance, I think most of us think that we understand what that option is like and what it is. But now, even within the public schools, there are lots of different options that didn't exist when we were in school or when parents were in school. There's STEM programs and magnet schools, open enrollment. That's a term that's relatively new to Arizona. There are gifted and talented programs. There are virtual options, all within the public district schools. So public district schools have a lot to offer just in and of themselves and a lot to sort of understand. There's also charter schools, which are public. A big misnomer is people think that they cost money. Charter schools are free. They're public schools. They're privately operated, with a bit more flexibility to how they can educate, right? So charter schools are public and free. You have private schools. I think we all know what those sort of look like and entail. with COVID, virtual and online schools really popped up and grew. And while it's not a school type per se, it really does. It's a different way of educating children and one that's become quite popular. Speaking of post-pandemic, homeschools and micro schools have really sort of flourished and grown and expanded since the pandemic. They do offer a flexible, personalized learning with student-centered approach, typically small class sizes. And a lot of people don't know micro schools or aren't really familiar, but essentially they're kind of the modern day version of the one-room schoolhouse. Is probably the best way, and have grown and expanded, I think, from the homeschool movement. So those are the different types of schools for the most part that exist here in Arizona. Lots to choose from, lots to digest, and lots to explore. So step one, I think in this process of evaluation is really not evaluating the school at all, but really more something that families need to do internally and questions that you need to ask yourself. So, we can't really talk about evaluating a school until we first identify what we're looking for. So really, this should be the starting off point for your family. And honestly, before any time is spent researching schools, touring schools, going down those roads, I think it's prudent to do this step first and really ask yourself as a parent, ask your family, what are our needs as a family and what are our child's needs? Because that will really drive the bus as to what kind of school you are looking for and ultimately what kind of schools you're going to be evaluating. Obviously parents know, you know your child better than anyone else. So you need to feel confident in that. You need to trust your gut. You need to trust your instinct. But there is another person, if your child's in preschool, or pre-K program, there is another person or other people that can really help and be instrumental in helping you identify what you or your child might need. And that person is your preschool teacher or your provider, your care provider. So they can be a wonderful resource. They see your child in a school setting. They see them socially. They see their academic skills. And so they would be really a good person to lean to and to ask some of these questions when you are talking about trying to identify what does my child need in an educational setting. So there are many different factors that might play into a school decision, and these are going to be different from family to family and from child to child. So these might be related to transportation. They might be family related. So transportation, location, aftercare needs, sort of the logistics of a school. The times they're open, the times you can drop off and pick up, certainly needs to consider. They might be factors that would help your child thrive. So extracurricular programs. Is it a hands-on school with a STEM curriculum, or an emphasis in fine arts that might be attractive or necessary for your child? But it's really, really important to sort of identify what those family needs are and what those child's needs are. For my family, location was key. Aftercare, extracurricular became really important factors for us. We both worked and needed to have our children somewhere until 5, 6 o'clock at night. So those were the things driving our bus. Everybody's going to have different factors for your specific needs. So step one is really making a list, talk to your child's preschool, and then really identify what is it that you think that you need or want in a school. And I would write those things down, kind of prioritize them, and that will help get you on your way to looking at schools. Step two is really where the research comes in. Our recommendation is that your research consists of many different forms of information gathering, right? So you have online research, which you can use My Schools Tucson, you can use the Arizona Department of Education, you can use the school or the district's website to gather information and look into schools closely. And that's going to be really something that will save you time from driving around from school to school. Another really important piece is the word of mouth. So I would say that that is probably the most common form of research that parents and families do, is they talk to other families, they talk to their own family members, they try to hear from the community what those experiences have been at that particular school. And it's 100% natural for us to care about what other humans think. That's why Yelp exists. Um, and as I said, word of mouth is the most common form. However, I would really go down that road cautiously. Every family, every child is different. And when you're talking to people, they're sharing their experience. And, that is not going to be necessarily what that experience looks like for you. But word of mouth nonetheless is a fine way to start to gather your information. And then lastly, school tours. We'll get to that in a little bit, but by far, in my mind, the most important step that a family can take when they are evaluating their school options. So obviously, do not rely solely on one of these methods only. It's really important to do as much as you can in all three of those areas. And why do we need to research schools? Why do we need to tour schools? Well, it's obvious not all schools are the same. And I think that, I hate to state the obvious, but as a parent, I was pretty ignorant when I went through this process. And, I think I made some generalizations about what district schools were like, sort of clumped them all into a bag, what charter schools were like, or what I thought they were like, or what they provided. And I really didn't know, and wasn't clear to me until I started to do exploration. And unfortunately, it was when we had our children in the school that I learned some of these things. But not all schools offer free and full day kindergarten. Some of them only offer half day, and then they charge for the other half if you need that service. Some charter schools don't provide free lunch or transportation, so some do. It's not all charter schools. You can't make that generalization, but it's really important to not assume that they're going to provide these things or that what this experience is going to be like. But when you find schools that you're interested in, really ask those questions so you know what to expect. Another thing, we've moved our child from a charter school to a district school, and the homework policy was drastically different, and there's two sides to that. And, while one, yes, I want my child working and having academic rigor, it also became challenging to get homework done on a daily basis when we were getting home at 6 o'clock. So to really understand what those requirements are of that school is an important thing. And sometimes we forget about that until we get there and we realize, oh my gosh, this isn't working out. But just be aware that not all charter schools are the same. Some offer things that other charter schools do not, and not all district schools are going to be the same and offer the same sort of services. So school letter grades and rankings, this is really kind of an important factor here in Arizona. All public schools annually get evaluated by the state of Arizona using an A through F letter grade. So every public school each year will be given one of those grades, letting you know how they are performing, right? And so the schools take great pride in it. They put that up on their banner in front of their school when you drive by. They put it up on their marquee. If they're an A or B school, they're really promoting that. They're really emphasizing that, which is great. But I think a lot of families don't really know what that letter grade represents. And they think, oh, it's an A school or it's a B school. They're doing great stuff. My thing is really get familiar with what those letter grades mean and what they and how they can sort of guide you in this decision-making process. So what do they rank, right? So the state of Arizona is going to give a letter grade. It is based essentially on academic achievement and growth. Okay, so elementary schools, that's grades 3 through 8. They're going to take a standardized test every year, and that performance is then what dictates those letter grades for the most part, and we'll get into it in a little bit. They also look at the growth. Is the school experiencing growth in those scores? But at the end of the day, they're coming back to those standardized test scores. So when we're talking about a K through 5 school, It's the performance of third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders at that school. We're talking about a high school. It's the performance of the 11th graders at that high school on a standardized test. And the standardized test for high schoolers is the ACT. And those tests are essentially going to be measuring reading, writing, and math. Those are the skills that are looked at on those tests. And here I've broken down sort of where those letter grades come. So K-8 school letter grades, half of their letter grade is coming from growth and improvement on standardized tests, 30% from student performance. So are they performing at a high level? Are they growing? What are those scores indicating every year? And then there's 20% coming from other areas. But even those other areas are really related to standardized test performance. 9th and 12th grade, a little less emphasis on growth, improvement, and student performance. They have some college and career readiness and graduation rates that then go into play. But the letter grades for high schools, again, a lot is dictated by the standardized test scores of the 11th graders at that high school. So while letter grades are important, they're important for schools and they're important for parents. However, you need to remember that that's just one factor, and be cautious not to allow that to be the sole indicator of what is a good school, right? So letter grade of an A, let's not jump to the conclusion that that's the perfect school for you or that's the school your child needs to be. There's really far more that goes into the educational experience, and
Scott,
you
we
as a
have a
family.
question.
Yeah.
It says, could you have a great school and teachers, and it possibly is the student skewing the grade?
So yeah, you could have a great school, you could have great teachers, and if students are not performing, if we go back to this slide, if students are not performing, then that's going to hurt their letter grade. But in theory, over time, if you got a great school and great teachers, that they would be doing their part to increase that. But yes, student performance is going to be 30% of that letter grade. And so again, if you have a low performing school or low performing students, right? The students are going to, how they perform on that test is going to be, regardless of great teachers, regardless of the culture, regardless of the leadership, student performance is going to be a factor, right? So another reason why I think the state has included growth and improvement. So you can have low performing students. If they're improving because of great teachers and a great school, they're getting points on the growth and improvement component, which is going to help their overall letter grade. You can also have schools that students are reading below or testing below state averages, and they have letter grades of A, right? An A or a B. And you think, how is that possible? The students are reading and they're doing math at levels that are below the state average. How is that possible that they're an A or B school? Well, they're doing that because their school has shown growth from last year to this year, and they're getting points for that positive gain. So yeah, that's a good question. Are there any other questions that have popped up about letter grades?
No, we can go on.
Yeah. Okay. So what they don't measure, and this is where you as a parent and your school tour work will come into play. They do not measure school safety. They're not going to measure athletics or extracurricular activities. They're not going to measure the art programs, whether they have a mariachi program, the class sizes. That has nothing to do with their letter grade. Whether that school is diverse and is welcoming for students. The letter grade again is based on essentially based on those standardized test scores. For the most part, is going to be what dictates those letter grades. And so in order to determine what your school's letter grades are, you can come to My Schools Tucson, and we've simplified that a little bit for you. We have school letter grades posted all over that. Like when you here is Ochoa Elementary School. When you pull that up, you can clearly see school letter grade of A. and if you click on the performance tab, it'll take you to where it shows the ELA and the math proficiency levels for that school. So we've pulled some of that key information from the state of Arizona and put it onto our website so you can easily find that information. We've also have links there. So if you do want to get to the Arizona Department of Education site, we have links that will take you directly there, and you can dive a little bit more into some of the stats and some of the information that they have. And so while letter grades are a wonderful benchmark and they're a nice yardstick to have, it gives families sort of a quick and easy way to gives them a snapshot of what's going on at the school. It's not going to capture everything that is happening. And that's really where visiting schools and touring schools is, in my mind, the most important thing to do as a parent if you're in the position and have the ability to evaluate some schools. So this is really your ace in your pocket. I would argue that we would never buy a car without a test drive. We would never rent an apartment or buy a house without doing a walkthrough. Yet lots of us, me included, have taken our kids to schools and dropped them off without ever having stepped foot on that campus, without ever having inquired or asked questions. And so, um, I'm ashamed to admit that I was one of those parents, but it really is something that if you've got the time and the ability to do that, finding your way onto that campus and asking key questions is important. It's going to give you insight that you just cannot gather from a website, from a neighbor, from a friend. It's going to really give you the best sort of feel as to whether that school might be a good fit for your family and your child. And so visiting and touring schools and getting on campus is one thing, but really asking some essential questions is the necessary step there, right? So, and many of us don't know what to ask. This isn't our specialty. We aren't in education. We don't know quite what to ask when we get in front of a teacher or an administrator. So on our website, we've listed some key questions to ask to kind of help families have a better idea as to, okay, well, what should I be inquiring about when I get onto campus? So, questions like, how is learning being evaluated? How are you testing my kids? How will I, as a parent, be informed of their student progress? How will I know if they're reading at grade level? Those are all really good questions to be asking. And, how does a school challenge high achieving students, and how do they support those who are struggling either academically or socially? The question I wish I asked is, what was the school's homework policy? How much homework is given every night? And is that going to fit in what my family can handle? When are students exposed to music and art and world language? Is that built into the curriculum? And then ultimately, what extracurriculars are offered and for what grade levels? Just because there's a mariachi band at an elementary school, that might sound great, but do they allow second graders, third graders, fourth graders? What levels of students are allowed into those extracurricular activities? How does a school address bullying and discipline? So just a few of the questions that you might find on our website, and a few that you might decide, hey, these are important for my family, and I'm going to ask them when I get on campus. So, and so outside of the questions, when you are on that campus, that is really your job. Your job is to observe what's happening, right? So, observe the classrooms, the hallways, the playgrounds, the lunchroom. These are places that will tell you a lot about how students and staff interact, and they'll tell you a lot about how the students relate to each other and how they're interacting with each other. Okay? It's going to give you a picture um, as to whether this is a place that you see your child fitting in. And you can learn a lot simply by observing. Watch them during passing period, watch them during lunch. Does it seem inclusive? Does it seem diverse and welcoming? And, really, this is where you as a parent, you need to trust your gut instinct. and really sort of trust that what you see and how that makes you feel is going to lead you to the right place. And so what you want to avoid, like there is a lot to consider. You consider school rankings, school letter grades. I've taken my visit. Here's what parents tend to do, which kind of trips them up in this process. So number one, they're selecting schools without taking a visit. They're not asking enough questions when they get to campus. When they have those opportunities to inquire with the school, they're not really, they don't know the questions they should be asking, and then they're not getting the answers that they need. Choosing a school solely based on a name or reputation is one of the common mistakes that we all make. We listen to others. We take what they say. We don't take it lightly, yet when we base our decision solely on somebody else's experience or the reputation of school, we're really not taking into consideration all that we should be when we're selecting a school. And then we talked a lot about school ratings and letter grades, and I do think they're very important. I do not want to diminish them. They do serve their purpose, but relying too heavily on that school rating or the letter grade, filtering all the schools that have a letter grade of an A, you're going to eliminate some really wonderful options for you and your family, if that's all you're looking at, So while that might be the most important thing, and I'm not going to argue with you on that, you get to decide. I really want to encourage you to look beyond that letter grade, get onto that campus and really try to get a sense as to whether that will be a right fit, whether it's an A school, a B school, or a C school. And not being aware of admission enrollment deadlines is one of the mistakes that we commonly see. We see parents who had the desire to apply or enroll at a certain school, but didn't know when they had to get their application in. They didn't know they had to apply, and they didn't know what that process was like. So another key question when you have that opportunity is really ask and make sure you know what is their enrollment process, and how do I, as a parent, make sure that I am meeting those deadlines. So those are the parent pitfalls to avoid. And we are here, My Schools Tucson is here to really help make sure that that you make fewer of these and that we encourage you to sort of engage in this process. There are multiple ways. If you have questions as you're going through this process, if you have questions for us or for our team, you can email us, you can call us. We have a direct one-on-one support line, and we can hop on a Zoom and do a personal call with you if you would so desire. It's free. We offer bilingual support and the ability for you as a family to really get sort of some unbiased information. When you go to schools are going to, they ultimately want you and your family to send your child there. So you're going to get the information from their mouths. And while I don't think that they're being dishonest or not to be trusted, they are also going to talk to you specifically about that school and sell you that school. So you wouldn't go to Ford to buy a Chevy. You wouldn't go to Toyota to buy a Ford. It's really important to sort of get an unbiased and kind of model agnostic view and get some answers to your questions if you have them. So My Schools Tucson is here to help to support parents in this process, and we want to make that easy for you as a family to access. Outside of the phone and the Zoom and the email, if that doesn't work for you, you can go to our website. We have a chat feature, and you can just plop questions into the chat there. And it's not a bot. It's not a robot answering those questions. It'll come to either myself or Dzoara, and we would be glad to answer your questions that way if that way's easier for you. And lastly, I want to thank you for your time tonight. I know raising kids is not easy. It takes a lot of time, and the fact that you're spending your time listening to this and trying to put yourself in a better position leaves me encouraged that you are going to be actively engaged in your child's education. And there is really no better gift that you could give your children than to do that. So I do thank you for your time. And our doors and phone lines are always open. And if you need help or support along the way, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll guide you as best that we can. So that concludes the presentation, and really want to open it up to any questions. If there are any questions at this time, Dzoara and I can field those. All right. So Patty and